continued her study in the field of South Asian studies at the University of Cambridge. She completed her PhD at the same subject at the same School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. After returning to her home country, she taught at Penzamene Peter Catholic University and joined Foreign Service in 2021. She's been the deputy head of the mission at the Embassy of Hungary in Islamabad since 2023. I welcome you here in Peshawar and especially to the Peshawar Museum on behalf of my colleague and from my seniors, from my teachers who are basically in front of me. So we all welcome you. So please, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Can I ask if everyone can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Dear organizers of Peshawar Museum, dear esteemed speakers, dear ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, Salamuna, a very good afternoon to all of you. Da zama la para ya aziz deche stasu pa khukle Peshawar khar ke mujudayam. Stasu shukriya khe ma ta mu balanak rakra. Da Peshawar ta zama avlane safarde za khuvaish vuche Peshawar ta rasham. Sorry about my broken Pashto. I just thought I'd say a few words. Allow me to first thank Peshawar Museum for hosting this event that we have been planning for so long. I cannot imagine a more fitting venue, to be very honest with you. We are among the walls where the very subject of this symposium, the great Hungarian-British polyhistor Sir Aurel Stein once stood, and where he worked as honorary curator of the Peshawar Museum between 1910 and 1917. Personally, I do not only feel honored, but also privileged to be here and to be amongst such wonderful experts who admire Aurel Stein's work. Before I give the floor to them, allow me to highlight why we are here today. Afterwards, I will also say a few words about Stein's work in the region and its overall significance in his career. So why did we decide to organize this symposium now? First, we at the Embassy of Hungary feel that those Hungarian artists, educationists, academics who lived and worked in British India in the territory of today's Pakistan deserve a lot more attention, and we have been working on highlighting their presence here. Ambassador Béla Fazekas, whose tenure in Pakistan ended recently, was particularly active in this regard, and I only hope to help continue his work. You might be surprised to hear that there were actually quite a few of us Hungarians who worked in this region, and today we are here to celebrate one of them, perhaps the most well-known, Sir Aurel Stein. It is an honor to have with us such excellent academics who kindly agreed to share their extensive knowledge about Stein. My fellow countryman, Mr. Máté Rottár, is here with us online to introduce the Stein collection and manuscripts held at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Professor Luca Olivieri, who has contributed greatly to what we know of Stein with his invaluable publication, Sir Aurel Stein and the Lords of the Marches, the new archival materials. And of course, your very own Dr. Abdul Samad, who will hopefully join us later during this symposium and who has himself published a lot on sites that Stein himself visited as well. Secondly, with this symposium, we hope to promote scientific cooperation between our countries. While relations between Pakistan and Hungary have historically been excellent, by the way, we celebrate the 60th anniversary of establishing diplomatic relations this year, we would very much like to help build stronger ties between universities and research institutes as well. In this slide, I am happy to share with you that the legal framework for cooperation in your field, archaeology, is already established. The MOU on cooperation in the field of archaeology between the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and Hungary was signed in April 2025 during the visit of His Excellency Péter Szijjártó, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary. Now it's up to us and you to fill this MOU with substance, and allow me to assure you that the Embassy of Hungary in Islamabad is ready to help promote cooperation between Hungarian and Pakistani institutes in the field of archaeology. Third, an important date is coming up. Next year, we celebrate the 100th anniversary of Stein's expedition in Swat Valley. I hope this symposium can serve as a pilot for a larger scale event to celebrate this anniversary. In other words, we are hopeful that we will meet again next year. And now, allow me to share a few thoughts about Stein's work in the region. But first, who exactly was Aurel Stein? The name of Stein is surely known by everyone in this room. But the response to this question, who was Aurel Stein, depends a lot on who you ask and where. Of course, most people know him as the archaeologist working on Central and South Asia, but he was so much more than that. If you check his academic CV, you might conclude that he was a linguist. He was familiar with classical languages such as Latin and Greek. He spoke most major European languages besides Hungarian, his mother tongue, of course, about a dozen Asian languages, among them Turkish, Arabic, Persian, and Sanskrit. But according to his own assessment, he could not speak Chinese because, I quote, he only knew 1,000 or 2,000 characters. If we look at his work in Lahore, he was primarily an educationist. He served as the principal of Oriental College for 11 years, and he taught there as well. But if you were to ask the Maharaja of Kashmir, on the other hand, he was a catalogist of his library. If you look at his work as part of the British administration in India, he was a government officer. If you read notes of his expeditions, he was an explorer as much as an archaeologist. He was also a cartographist, and he always thought of history and cartography as complementary disciplines. Here in and around Peshawar, he was an archaeologist, a government officer, and the honorary curator of this wonderful museum. He was a real polyhistor, in other words, someone who is regarded as one of the great explorers of Inner and South Asia all over the world. While one might argue that he might be more well known to his excavations and explorations in Inner Asia, along the Old Silk Route and Turkestan, for example, no doubt his work in today's Pakistan and India are of equal importance. His lifelong attachment to this region is evident. Let me briefly reflect on the highlights of his career in British India. His interest in India started in 1886 when he met Indologist and philologist Rudolf Hörnle in Vienna during an Orientalist conference, where he learned of an ancient mathematical manuscript found in Bakhshali, very close to where we are right now. So you could say that Peshawar has a lot to do with sparking his interest in the subcontinent, actually. Afterwards, he spent months in England in the same year where his keenness to study India grew even further, and traveling there became his primary objective. In 1887, Stein finally set sail to the subcontinent, and in 1888, at the ripe old age of 25, he assumed the role of registrar at the University of Punjab, where he became a professor of Sanskrit language and literature. Subsequently, from 1888 to 1899, he served as the principal of Oriental College. During his tenure, Stein oversaw the establishment of the Sanskrit Manuscript Library in Jammu, housing a collection of 5,000 to 6,000 rare manuscripts. His first scientific work was published in 1894, which was a catalogue of this library. In 1895, he was elected as an external member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. He gave his inaugural speech at the Academy on the topic of the role of the White Huns and related tribes in India. This topic continued to occupy him later on as well. In 1912, under the auspices of the Indian government, he searched for a history of the migration of Hungarian and Turkic tribes. The focus of his research was the mutual influence of civilizations, and he considered the Silk Road to be a meeting point. No doubt, Stein was very attached to India and spent a good number of his adult years in the region. For nearly 30 years, Aurel Stein spent his summers, if he could, in what he called the Happy Valley of Kashmir. He himself wrote that although his attention was directed towards distant regions, his love for Kashmir remained unchanged. Ervin Baktai, a famous Hungarian Orientalist and artist, visited him in Kashmir in 1928. In his book, The Land of the Happy Valley, he described his dinner with Stein the following way. The servants served a simple but good dinner. If I remember correctly, he was a Punjabi boy, and Stein Aurel spoke to him in his native language, Punjabi. He usually addressed each of his men in their own native language, some in Hindi, some in Urdu, some in Punjabi, some in Kashmiri, while he spoke to his Pathan servant in Pashto. However far away he was from home, and however many languages he spoke, though, his connections with Hungary was continuous, and he continued publishing Hungarian throughout his life. He even wrote his diaries in Hungarian, and he always used Hungarian language with happy pride. He continued to correspond in his mother tongue with his fellow Hungarian Orientalists. And now, let me say a few words as an introduction to the further presentations by our colleagues about his work in and around Peshawar. Aurel Stein's work in the Northwest Frontier Province, which is today's Pakistan, includes archaeological tours, survey work, excavations carried out during his service in India from 1898 to 1928. He began his work in the region when he was still based in Punjab, and then continued when, after being awarded British citizenship, he took the position of Superintendent of Archaeology in the Northwest Frontier Province and Balochistan from 1904 to 1910. He was mainly interested in following Alexander the Great's route to the subcontinent, and he mostly focused on finding Buddhist sites. And he was the first European to visit many of them. During his surveys, he saved multiple artifacts, primarily Gandharan sculpture, and that were given to the Assistant Commissioner at Mardan, who, at Stein's recommendation, arranged for the sculptures to be transferred to the new Peshawar Museum that opened in 1907, of which he was the honorary curator until 1917. In 1917, he retired from government service in British India, but he was granted extension of service on special duty to work on publications for another 10 years. It was during this time that he finally made it to Swat as a researcher, a place he had long wanted to visit, in search of Aurnos, the site of Alexander the Great's last siege before advancing to the Indus. This was in 1926, next year, 100 years ago. This time, the ruler of Swat not only granted him the permission to visit the proposed area, but he also allowed him to survey most of the areas of his territory during this visit. I don't know if you've seen the roll-up as you entered Peshawar Museum. There is a photograph of Aurel Stein sitting next to a gentleman. That gentleman is the Raja of Tangir and Darel, and the photograph was taken by the son of the the ruler of Swat at that time. He became later himself the ruler of Swat as well, Jahangir Miangul. So back to his Stein's work. The expedition in 1926 took place in the spring and lasted for 2.5 months. Stein spent his time identifying sites associated with Alexander the Great's operations. And while he thought he identified the place of Aurnos, decades later it was revealed that the actual Aurnos was not the one Stein thought it to be, but the last mountain Stein climbed while in Swat. Stein's work in British India concluded in 1928, when he retired after publishing a book on his third expedition to Inner Asia. He died 15 years later in Kabul, the place he was longing to visit since he was a child. Ironically, he fell ill right after arriving in Kabul, and passed away a week later. When he felt he was about to die, he reportedly said, "I have had a wonderful life, and it could not be concluded more happily than in Afghanistan, which I have wanted to visit for 60 years." The Anglican pastor from Peshawar conducted the funeral service in the Gora Kabur, where his grave is still standing and is looked after. He did indeed live an extraordinary life, and us Hungarians could not be more proud of him. We are here today to celebrate his incredible polyhistor, Sir Aurel Stein, and I hope to attend many, many more events like this one. Now, without further ado, let me give the floor to Professor Luca Olivieri. Thank you for your attention, Viramanana.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gunsberg, for your very touching words and this very, I would say, more than comprehensive introduction. Of course, I need some technical help at this stage because I need to share my presentation with you, and I would like to see whether this is working or not. Just give me 1 second, and I will see if it is possible. It's easy to share it now because the sharing is not turned on. So I'm sending the request to the organizers to please allow the co-host to allow us, me and Dr. Mate Rota to present as well. So that's something that has to be operated from Peshawar. I'm sorry, but you have to allow us to present. Is now working? Can you please tell me whether this is working? My voice is perfectly understandable there in Peshawar?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let me start from the beginning. Okay, thank you very much for this introduction. And thanks to you, Dora Gunsberg, for this the introduction, this very comprehensive sketch of what the various layers. So how Stein. I would prefer to use the ordinary British pronunciation of his family name, Stein. Of course, this is how generally it is known. Here in Pakistan, we know perfectly that his name should be rather pronounced Stein. And thank you also to Dr. Mate Rota for being present, and to Dr. Samad, who is joining us very soon. Okay, the origin of my talk, I hope to be confined in the time of 20-25 minutes, no more than that. I will try my best. So the origin of this talk is the lucky discovery of an archive collection which happened in Pakistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, at the time still Northwest Frontier Province, in summer 2008. Okay, in that summer of that very year, security conditions in Swat were extremely bad and had been seriously deteriorated by the Taliban uprising. And of course, a military cordon sanitaire has been imposed by the army around Swat. But you know, as every cloud has a silver lining, okay, while I was vainly awaiting permission to enter the valley, I was given the right to be lodged in the political agent's guest house in the Malacan fort at the gates of Swat. That was exactly the same building in which Aurel Stein himself had stayed on several occasions. And the last time was, for example, in December 1896, before his visit in 26, of course. But the last time he was there was in December 1896, along with Alfred Fouché, who later became the director of the Délégation Française, Archaeologique Française in Afghanistan, who was, according to some, including Stein himself, the reason why Stein was never allowed to visit Afghanistan, by the way. Anyhow, at the time of my visit in 2008, very little had changed in the meantime. Same furniture, same garden, same landscape, and almost the same circumstances. The political agent at that time, Mr. Rashad Khan, who was recently Secretary Information of KP, was practically acted with me as the generous continuer of a long series of great names who were posted there as a political agent in Malaga. And he decided to, so to say, exploit my forced presence there in the Fort of Malaga and invited me to classify and study some materials which were stored in the so-called license room in the old British archives, which were stored, hundreds of folders, which at that time were in very degraded conditions. I did my best to clean and classify as much as possible hundreds of files and preserve them from what would have been in other conditions their final destiny, their final fate of being pulped, actually. So my attention was actually amongst the various hundreds of files, which were all pertaining to the pre-partition times, so were all pertaining to up to 1895 and 96, when the Malacan agency was established, until 1947. So my intention was drawn by 3 amongst these hundreds of folders, and I requested and received the permit from the political authorities and administrative authorities of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the permission to photograph them and to study. And these studies were ultimately published in 2 major volumes, and plus a series of research articles. But these were the 2 volumes which were published. The first one, which you kindly mentioned it before, in 2015, and the second one in 2023. By the way, the second is available as a free resource that can be downloaded from the ArchaeoPress website for free. Okay, the 3 folders, these are the 3 folders, okay, once again, contains in total 344 documents of various kinds, and all referring to archaeological research activities, and in a very, very, very loose sense, also the so-called protection of cultural assets, okay, between 1896 and 1937. In all the area which was under the jurisdiction of the Malacan agency at that time, which was namely not only Malacan protected area, which was the Malacan area, the Malacan Pass and the surrounding area, but also the native states of Dir, Chitral, Swat, and the Khanate of Bajaur. 4 groups of documents are particularly relevant and will be summarized in this talk today. They are all connected to the explorations of Aurel Stein in Swat. The first group is linked to his 1926 trip to Swat, and to his identification of the Indian Hornos of Alexander the Great with Mount Pirsar. And the other groups are related to 3 failed plans by Stein to carry out new explorations in Swat. That a goal that he eventually only accomplished in 1941 when he was 79. And the 3 attempts occurred in 28, 31, and 1933. The last interesting aspect, which is very important, which was one of the aspects which should be highlighted as far as concerned the multiform interests of this great British Hungarian scholar, was how much he actually contributed to the concept of what was for that time an extraordinary and very advanced legislative instrument, which was for British India and later on for Pakistan, because it remained in rule until 1975, which was the Ancient Monument Preservation Act, which was issued in 1904, sorry, with successive amendments until 1933. Okay, so we start from the first aspect of this, which has been partly revealed by new documents found in Malakand, which was Stein and the Indian Aornos, okay, which starts in 1923 and ends up in 1926. The first group, which is related to the history of how Aornos was defined, identified as in the Pirsar mountain, is particularly important since it is related to a long debated issue, which is the location of the ancient Indian Aornos, the mountain where the inhabitants of Basira and other Assakenoi, other people living in this Swat region at the time of Alexander the Great, during the Macedonian siege, took refuge. For many obvious reasons, because of Alexander the Great, of the narrative of the British presence over there, which was somehow linked to the presence of this great military ancestors of the Western presence in Northwest India, the Macedonians and Alexander, of course. The whereabouts of Mount Aornos had attracted the interest of British scholars since the mid-19th century, since the time of General Court, actually, who was a French general at the service of Ranjit Singh. So before British India was established as a Northwest Frontier province there in that part of India. Anyhow, remaining within the context of the British scholar, British explorers and scholars, we have to consider that Alexander Cunningham, before Stein, located the Indian Aornos at the site of Ranighat, which is in the lower Buner, while James Abbott located it with Mount Mahaban, which is in Swabi. Both sites were later discarded with good reasons by Stein, who was convinced that the Mount Aornos should have been located and researched in the Mount Pirsar. Okay. Later, other scholars, including myself, more convincingly situated the Mount Aornos on the Mount Ilam in Swat, and Stein, nevertheless, still today, the location of Pirsar as the Aornos is still mentioned as the hypothesis still today. In a kind of Sir Aurel Dixit syndrome, which is very much in vogue still, especially amongst the classic historians. Anyhow, today, most of the scholars, especially those who are well-versed in Oriental history and the Oriental side, some aspects related to the military history of Alexander in Northwest India, most of scholars accept that what already Sir Aurel somehow had admitted, which is that Mount Ilam was possibly is the most logical and plausible identification of Mount Aornos, as proposed first by Giuseppe Tucci, later accepted by and followed by, for example, Philippe Eggermont, or today Claude Rapin and Llewellyn Morgan and Omar Coloro and many other scholars. Anyhow, the point is that, as I posted in 1996 in an article of mine, which was published in journal East and West, the hypothesis that Aornos should have been searched with Mount Ilam starts from the evidence of Basira, which is the key point. Basira, Barikot, identified with Barikot, the key point for the localization of Aornos. Basira is the modern day site of Barikot in Swat. Okay, now, according to the main classical sources, which are Arrian and Curtius Rufus, in the autumn of the 327 BCE, during his military campaign in Swat, Alexander the Great conquered 3 cities. While the whereabouts of Massaga, the capital of the Assakenoi, is now located with a great degree of certainty at Mingora, the actual capital, the major market city in the Swat Valley. The other 2, Ora or Nora and Beira or Basira, had been positively identified respectively with Udegram and Barikot. And on the identification of Udegram with Ora and Barikot with Basira, we totally are in agreement with what has been first proposed by Aurel Stein. Okay. Now, although the memory of both cities, Ora and Basira, vanished in later Western sources, the name of Basira surfaced in an early 11th century Brahmi Sharada inscription, which was found by Harold Dean, the first political agent of Malakand and the great mentor of Aurel Stein, on the top of the Barikot Hill, and now is on display in the Lahore Museum. The inscription, already known, bears the toponym Vajrastana, which Giuseppe Tucci interpreted as Vajra, the stronghold of the Vajra. The name of the Vajra is practically actually the same name as the Basira of Aryan. But not only, in the Gandhari language, which was the Prakrit spoken in Swat, probably already at the time of Alexander the Great, but certainly we have epigraphic evidence since the first century BCE, in Gandhari, which was the Prakrit spoken in Swat in that time, the form for Vajra, the thunderbolt, is Vaira, which is extremely well attested in inscriptions and manuscripts. But the best approximation for the pronunciation of Vajra, Vaira, in Prakrit, Gandhari, is actually Veira, which is exactly the same name given by Curtius in his Historia Alexandri Magni, Libri qui supersunt, where it says, Beira, this is the name, Incole vocant. This is the name, this is how the local inhabitants pronounce the name of their own city. Okay, this is another element which allow us to say that it is absolutely certain or extremely certain or likely that the actual Barikot is the ancient Basira or Beira. But not only, because we have also, this information is also relevant in the light of the last excavation results of the work conducted by the Directorate General of Archaeology and Museums, the Italian Archaeological Mission, in the site of Barikot. Or this recent fieldwork has proven the existence, for example, of an extremely rich city with plenty of evidence of Achaemenian and Hellenistic material, with Achaemenian material at least since the 5th century BCE, thus providing a strong evidence in support of the existence of what the Curtius Rufus mentioned as urbs opulenta and Arrian describes as a polis. And by the way, there is also the proof that in radiocarbon dates of an ancient defensive wall found outside the Indo-Greek city has been dated to the end of the 4th century BCE, which might be an hint to the fact that the city, we might have found a fragment or a portion of the ancient fortification which was constructed or left by Alexander the Great before leaving Swat. Okay, now the peak of Mount Elam is there, dominating the landscape. It's just outside, let's say, outside in the outskirts of the Basira. Just 6 hour walking. I test by myself. I mean, starting from the center of Basira and reaching up the top is a 6 hour walk time. So nothing particularly. So it's really near. By the way, Mount Elam is the most dominating mountain in the region. You see on the top right, there is a photograph which is taken from Peshawar. It was taken in Peshawar last February. So from Peshawar, the top of Mount Elam can be visible in good, very shiny days of winter, especially in winter season. So the Mount Aornos, the Mount Pirsar, the Mount Pirsar is very much far away from the theater of the operations. There is another point, though, that Stein was convinced that Aornos would have been has to be located in the mountain Pirsar since before he had seen the mountain. In a letter to Sir Lord Maffei, that was a chief commissioner of the Northern Frontier Province in 1923, Stein expresses the interest to visiting the area of Tagot, the Amber Principality, Gorband, Candia, and especially Pirsar. And in that letter, Stein gives us a very important piece of information because he says that I got the description of Mount Pirsar from the deposed king of Swat, Abdul Jabbar Basha, who Stein had met at the court of the Nawab of Amb in 1921. So what I want to say is that most probably Stein had already had in mind that that might be, was or should be the Aornos of Mount Elam. But while he was exploring Swat, he found that hypothesis absolutely not I would say not. I mean, he started posing some doubts to himself as well, as we will see from something which has been written by him in his narrative, but also in private letters. So the project was cancelled, and because the British government received confidential information that the area was going to be under a military attack prepared by the SWAT state army. Stein presented again this project, a second time to the new chief commissioner, Sir Bolton, in July 25, so 2 years later. And Bolton's reply was very exhaustive and started keeping the Wali of Swat in the loop. And so the Bacha Saheb, at the time the British said not the Wali of Swat, but the Bacha Saheb, because the term, actually the British preferred the term Wali, not the Bacha Saheb. Bacha Saheb, sorry, was the term which the Nyanguls preferred to give to themselves, because Bacha Saheb is more than Wali. Wali means governor, while Bacha Saheb means the Basha, the Pasha. So Bacha Saheb showed great interest in the project. He said, no problem, no objection to allowing Stein to cross his territories in Swat, but he expressed reservation about allowing a foreigner to explore an area which was still under the threat of the enemies of the Swat state. But in plus, the most interesting thing is that the Nyangul had that Swat was not the best and the shortest way to reach that mountain. Okay, and now the rest of the story, what happened in 1926 is very well known. In March 26, he got the permission to visit Swat. Stein crossed the border of the Swat state, Lantake, made a complete, very exhaustive and comprehensive survey of the entire Swat Valley. And then he managed to cross Gorband, reach the upper Indus Valley, and go and climbed the mountain of Pirsar. Of course, in my view, against all the evidence, he still confirmed that the idea that that mountain was the Indian Aornos, as he had theorized it, hypothesized it some years later. Another point is very important, that his reconstruction of the itinerary of Alexander the Great is only based on, he preferred the itinerary proposed by Arrian of Nicomedia. A source whose accuracy has been questioned by more than one scholar, especially in recent scholarship. However, regarding the problem of Basir and Aornos, Stein tried to explain the oddity of his own choice by suggesting that the rock, the Petra, where the inhabitants of Basira had fled, was indeed the Ilam, okay? But that Ilam, that rock, was not the Aornos. It's a very complex and extremely, I would say, not particularly clear way of explaining what must have been clear to him immediately after he climbed the Mount Elam at the end of his 1926 tour in Swat. And he says, and he wrote, in his An Archaeological Tour in Upper Swaten on page 30, in views of these local observations, which were possible only after having climbed the Mount Elam and Pirsar, the suggestion appears to me justified that the place of safety sought by the fugitives from Basira was much more likely to have been Mount Ilam than the distant Aornos by the Hindus. Now, we have some interesting phases which were forgotten by most of the biographers of Aurel Stein, which were somehow revealed by the Malakan papers. I call this set of documents the Malakan papers. These occurred in 1928, 31, and 33, very briefly. In 1928, a group of 11 documents dated between May and August 1928 is related to a second survey project in Swat and Kohistan. Stein was particularly interested again to visit Kana and Gorband, these regions east of Swat, and along the watershed dividing Swat and Upper Indus. His idea was to cross Gorband from Swat to reach the area of Ogi in Hazara, after crossing the Indus at Takot, where today there is the major bridge across of the Karakoram Highway. However, we know from the proposal was sent to Bolton, the political agent, and we don't know the letter, but we know the reply of Bolton that the project was rejected for security reasons. Another one was in 1931. That was a moment very important for in the biography of Aurel Stein, because in June 31, Stein was on his way back from his fourth expedition in Chinese Turkestan, and he was in Gilgit. Stein asked for the permission to cross the Garvi Pass, which was connecting Gilgit with Chitral and Swat, at that point, the point where the Chitral, Gilgit, and Swat are very much connected by a single, I would say, ridge of mountains. And with the help of the Mitar of Chitral, he might have been in position to cross the mountains and reach Kalam, and go from Kalam, reach the state of Swat. Because Kalam was not under the control of the ruler of Swat, or was actually highly disputed between the Mitar of Chitral, the Nawab of Dir, and the Wali of Swat. Okay. And the British, meantime, had established a small agency over there for the control of the timber resources. Anyhow, at the end, after a long exchange of telegrams and letters between the various parts, the permit was refused, and Stein decided to go back from Gilgit to Kashmir, to his Buen Retiro. And then from Kashmir, he went down to Jhelum, and he consoled himself exploring the banks of the river Jhelum in the steppes of Alexander the Great. The third moment, which was almost unknown to most of the scholars, which was what was something which might have changed the history of archaeology in Swat, 1933. A last group of documents written between 1931 and 1933 represents a testimony of another neglected moment in the life of Aurel Stein to plan to carry out excavations in Swat. The story is very simple. He got the permission, he went to Swat, in mid-April he got the permission, went to Swat, but unfortunately on the 2nd of May, Stein fell off his horse in the area of Kabal, just on the right side of the river Swat, and he is forced to abort the expedition. Now, that's important. Of particular interest for us is one letter that's one of the letters that Stein has written to Bolton. No, sorry, to Gould, good friend of him, political agent in Malakand at that time. And he says, I'm quoting, "What you write about the areas of Swat," Stein writing, "what you write about the areas of Swat where you think no difficulties are to be anticipated is very reassuring to me. The site of Masaga, if it can be identified at all, has to be looked for either in the protected area north of Malakand, or else not far from the northern bank of the river in the Wallis territory. The first hypothesis, by the way, was the one which was first proposed by Stein and followed by Olaf Carroll until still in 1958, that Masaga was in Dir, actually, and not in Swat. And then there is a very interesting passage. If Stein says, if only Curtius Rufus, if only Curtius topographical details could be relied upon, there ought to be fair chance of locating the site. At that time, Curtius Rufus was still was considered 20, 30 years ago, was considered an unreliable source for historical reconstruction. So we understand now that the amount of important details preserved in Curtius Rufus' Historia is of paramount importance. It is evident that Curtius Rufus wrote his Historia basing on first-hand reports, which were the diaries left by the generals of Alexander the Great, which were evidently available to him. Otherwise, Curtius would have never been in position to say, Beira incole vocant. This is how the name of the city is pronounced by the local inhabitants, which is clearly an information which might have been preserved in one of these diaries. Okay, I don't want to go much ahead on this story of the whereabouts of Massaga. I can only tell you that now Massaga has been located with certain degree of certainty inside the city of Mingora, and soon in this year, with the help of the Directorate General of Archaeology and Museums, the Italian Archaeological Mission is starting a small excavation in one of the few free areas inside Mingora city, in order to reveal what was already visible in aerial photographs taken in the 50s, that under Mingora there is a huge, important extensive ruins of an ancient city, which were revealed by time by several excavations. For example, in Butkaras, for example, in Barama, for example, in Saidu Sharif, there were several excavations which revealed the existence of a huge city under the fabric of the modern Mingora. Anyhow, that will be something which will be discussed in future. Now, just to give you to tell you a few words about the importance of Stein, is geniality, and is just Stein was, for example, the first one who understood the potential value of Barikot area. He writes in the same letter that I showed you earlier that he was sure to find in this area many new Buddhist sites, and regarding the possibility of making an actual excavation, he was about to carry out excavation in 1931. If he had not fell off his horse, he would have probably already started, would have been the first to have started the excavation, either in Barikot or in Amlukdara. He says in the same letter, he writes, quoting, on the top of Barikot itself, the latter, this was the place where he wanted to excavate, starting the excavation in Barikot from the top, from the Acropolis. The latter is sure to have attracted occupation as a place of safety, long before Buddhist times. Okay, my time is almost gone, but I want just a couple of things that I want to say without reading, but just let me try to summarize what I wanted to say in my written text. The contribution given by Aurel Stein to the formation of the Ancient Monument Preservation Act, okay, which was created as a result of a long series of correspondence between Peshawar, the Calcutta, Malakand. Why Malakand? Because Malakand was the place where great part of these illegal activities were going on. And what was the purpose of the Ancient Monument Preservation Act? The purpose of the Ancient Monument Preservation Act was to impede illegal excavations within British India, but also in the territories immediately outside British India, and to forbid the import of material illegally excavated in British India. Why? Because the problem for the British was, and that was, for example, James Burgess' report says very clearly to everybody, to the political level, administrative level, to the research level, that the Germans and French have more objects from British India, especially from Gandhara, that we in our British Museum, either in British India or outside. So The role of Aurel Stein was extremely important. I don't want to go much in detail about that, just to give you the idea who were the how you say, the protagonist of these people. You have people of the caliber of MacMahon, who was political agent in Malaga, and then it became the one who created the MacMahon line, which was dividing India from China. And Aurel Stein, of course, and Lord Curzon, who was the viceroy of British India at that time. Just a very simple piece of information. That was 1926. Stein, when visited Swat, was allowed to visit Swat in the same year when the Swat state was recognized by the British India. So when Stein was still climbing the Mount Ilam, the same day in Said Sharif, there was the Darbandi at the presence of the British authorities, the coronation ceremony of the Bacha Sahib, the first Wali of Swat. In his capacity, and this is the last slide that I want to show you, but I needed to read a word about that. In his capacity, he was a superintendent of the Archaeological Survey in Northern Circle. He wrote in a letter in 1933 and 1913, sorry, to the political agent that illegal export of antiquities was on the rise in Swat and in the region surrounding. And then this letter was later reiterated by Stein and to Bolton. And Keane was the second political agent in the second semester of 1926. Keane replicated this letter, sent the content of this letter to the Wali of Swat. He said, and he sent the views of Stein. He said, Aurel Stein, the great researcher, has said that in your territory, the antiquities are not properly protected. I mean, I'm summarizing the content of the letter sent from Malagan to the Wali of Swat. And the reply of the Wali of Swat was extremely interesting because he said, with reference to your letter, number so and so, of the 19th of June 26, I have the honor to state that I do cooperate with the government regarding the buildings and stone carvings of historical interest situated within my area and will try my local best for their preservation. So Stein informed Malagan, put in the loop the Wali, and the Wali started what was the beginning of the actual legal exploration of Swat. Because after that, in 1938, what happened that Badger and Wright went there with the permission to do some excavations in Swat. In 1956, the Italian archaeological work started over there. And not only that, following this letter of the Swat state, what happened in March 1956 is the utmost importance. The Ancient Monument Preservation Act was de facto accepted by the Swat state and became one of the first Pakistani laws which was accepted to be implemented in the Swat state. And by consequence, we have the construction of the Swat Museum, which was the first Pakistani building ever built in the Swat state. Just to conclude this part, we have to remember that the Swat state remained independent until 1969. And this event happened in 1956. Who was beyond this? Of course, the Mianguls were extremely enlightened rulers. There were a lot of support and pressure from the British administration, but the first who had the idea that the protection of Swat antiquities should be implemented and put under the responsibility of the ruler of Swat was presented by Aurel Stein. Thank you very much for your attention. Dera Manana, Dera Manana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luca, for your insightfulness and for your deep-seeking knowledge about Sir Aurel Stein. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Matt Rotter. The title of the presentation is Brief Introduction to the History and Holdings of the Oriental Collections of the LHAS Budapest and its Stein bequest. He completed his bachelor's in Mongolian studies and bachelor in Turkish studies, Chinese, and studied for about 1 year each in Ulaanbaatar and Urumqi as a scholarship holder. He is currently writing his doctoral dissertation at Mongolian Studies Program of ELTE. His project is on the processing of unpublished collection of Afghan Mongols language from the 1930s. He has participated in the several field research trips, primarily in Mongolia and China and Central Asia states. He has been working in Oriental collection since 2019 and since August 2024 as its acting head of department. So, Mr. Matt Rotter, the stage is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you hear me there? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful event, and thank you for this very exciting presentation before mine. I don't have to introduce myself as I was introduced kindly. And I hope that my presentation will not be much less interesting, but I'm not sure that this will be the same kind. Did I succeed in sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, okay. So I will try to only present a short introduction to the history of the collection which I am now leading, and how the Stein materials entered our collection. So first, about the historical background, that the Hungarian Academy of Sciences was established exactly 200 years ago. So we are celebrating the bicentenary this year by Count István Széchenyi. And the next year, the library was established as a support for the academy by Count József Teleki. They were both aristocrats of Hungarian descent, and they used their own wealth to support the study and the research of Hungarian and preservation of Hungarian language and Hungarian science in general. This is the building of the library in the end of the 19th century, but the Oriental collection is using the same building still. First, I have to note that Oriental studies and Hungarology or Hungarian studies were not quite separated from its foundations, because as you might have heard about that Hungarians traced their origins from Asia, and these easterly origins led many Hungarian scholars to explore the East, and so Oriental.
So sorry to cut you, but the slides are not moving. If you could just check that.
Why? They are moving at my.
Perhaps if you close it, stop sharing the screen and start sharing again. Now it's moving. Yes.
Okay. So, and if I. And what about now? Did it move?
Now we see your first slide.
Okay, so I will just go like this, I
Now
think.
we can see your second slide.
Okay. So this was the third slide. As I have said, Hungarian studies and Oriental studies weren't quite separated in the 19th century in Hungary. So that's why the Hungarian Academy of Sciences and its library both collected Oriental literature, Oriental manuscripts, and such. Every kind of materials that were connected to Oriental studies were just incorporated in the general collection or holdings of the library. Of course, there were great scholars who lived in the 19th century and even before that, who bequeathed their materials to the library before the establishment of the Oriental collection. But in the end of the 19th century and the start of the 20th century, these several separate branches of Oriental studies were so developed that every the departments and schools in the country raised the idea that they might need a separate library to support education in Oriental studies. But until World War II, nothing has happened. The Academy of Sciences didn't really support the idea to establish a separate collection. But after the Soviet occupation and the political changes that followed it, they started to reorganize the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and Ligeti Lajos, or Louis Ligeti, as you might have heard about him, who was an expert in Mongolian studies, Turkology, and Sinology, has become the vice president of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and he had his position for 20 years. So in 1949, when this reorganization was completed, he strongly supported the idea of a separate library or a separate collection of the library. So in 1951, they opened the Oriental collection of the library. It was, as I mentioned, every kind of books, journals, manuscripts were incorporated in the general collection, so they had to select every scholarly literature and manuscripts that are connected to Oriental studies from this whole collection. So the first era or first period of the Oriental collection was characterized by this kind of work. Rásonyi László, or László Rásonyi, led the collection from 1951 to 1967, and he worked with a single colleague. They had to rebuild half of the building, so the circumstances were far from being ideal, and he succeeded in collecting most of the Oriental books and manuscripts and consolidated the circumstances in the library. After him, a longer period started with the leadership of Bese Lajos, who was a linguist and a Mongologist, or Mongolist, and Apor Eva, who was an expert in Persian and Iranian studies in general. Both were really focusing on scholarly research, and further acquisitions characterized this period as well. So, for example, the Tibetan manuscripts, most of them entered in this long period. After them, Dévényi Kinga and Kelecsényi Ágnes led the Oriental collection. During their time, we started to experience a change in library use, which is universal, I would say. And we entered the period of digitalization and digitization. About the holdings and the current state of the Oriental collection, we are holding approximately 100,000 volumes of books and journals, but the Oriental manuscript and old printed books amount to only 10,000 volumes. In this circle of manuscripts, we can classify by languages. We have 700 Turkic, mostly Ottoman Turkish manuscripts, 2,550 Tibetans, and I should mention the Hebrew collection, as Hungary has a historical minority of Hebrews, so we have 1,700 old books and manuscripts in Hebrew. And some other minor languages, and the other one, which I must highlight, is the South Asian collection, which includes a much smaller number, but some Hindustani manuscripts are also included in them. About the Stein bequest. As we have heard from the mentions of both presenters, that Stein basically considered himself a Hungarian throughout his life, and he had very good relationship with the Hungarian intelligentsia after leaving the country. But his professional career was more linked to the British Empire, and basically most of the time he spent in India. So this resulted in the fact that his bequest is divided between several countries, and after his death, many of institutional changes have occurred. So the current situation is more complicated. Mm. Mm, he wrote in one of his letters to the then leading librarian of the Library of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, that many pleasant memories of my youth are connected with the fine library of the Academy. Apart from the paternal home, I spent my happiest hours there, and it was there that I began my studies to become an Orientalist, taking pains to learn the Sanskrit grammar, etc. So he he had an uncle, as you might know, who was a correspondent member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. So he had access to the library even during his secondary school studies. So he really did have memories from our library. So he actively sought to expand the holdings as well. So he presented one volume from from all of his publications, and in 1921 he donated his family letters to the academy. That was his first major donation. The next one was reported in 1922 when he wrote in the same letter, which I was quoting at the last line, that he decided to bequeath his books to the library of the academy, which amounted to 2,000 volumes by that time. In 1934, I'm sorry. His he presented a letter of donation about this, and also he expressed his will to establish a fund to support British and Hungarian scholars in the exploration of Central Asia, which is also still an active fund, the Stein-Arnold Fund, as you might know. Then after his death, the fate of the bequest was a bit more complicated, mainly because of the Second World War. In 1945, a complete list of the books was sent to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, but the letter didn't reach the actual academy, so they had to be resent. It had to be resent a year later. Then it became obvious that the bequest was separated in two parts. One located in the Bodleian Library, and the other one still in Kashmir, which was shipped to Europe in 1949. The first part was seized by the Enemy Property Department because the British Empire or Great Britain was still considered to be war enemy of Hungary. It was only released almost a decade later in 1956, exactly at the time when the Hungarian Revolution started against the Soviet occupation. So it hindered a bit more the shipping of the bequest. But according to Stein's will, this shipment reached the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in 1957. We have two catalogs, interestingly, of the Stein bequest, because one part was included in a kind of a frozen stock in one of our storages. So after publishing the first volume of this catalog, they have found many more, which are included in a supplement. You can find the links here. It's open access. And I hope that we can share these slides later somehow. So if somebody is interested, then just click it or copy it. About the whole volume and its content, I have to say that it included 2,300 books and reprint, 180 volumes of periodicals, journals, and added to them almost 1,200 more volumes were shipped from Kashmir. So the total is 3,600 volumes. 4/5 of this were incorporated in the Oriental collections holdings, and 1/5 is in the general collection. Maybe more interestingly, we have 6,500 photos. Many of them weren't published by Stein, but they are accessible now online. The bequest also included 6 Oriental manuscripts and 1,400 letters. Yes. The 6 manuscripts are 1 Turkish, 2 Sanskrit, and 3 Persian manuscripts. The Persian ones are historical works about Kashmir. There are other miscellaneous materials in the bequest, which includes maps, both published maps and manuscript maps, which were all published as well later. Captioned prints, proof sheets, manuscripts of his own works, so not Oriental manuscripts, anthropometric notes, 2 passports, 1 rusty scissors, some expedition invoices, bank papers, medical correspondence, and every kind of such. Maybe the diaries are more important than these. And the photographic notebooks, which helped the librarians in identifying the contents of many of his photos. about the photos in more closely. I have mentioned that they are open access in quite good quality, but the republication of these open access photos are of course not allowed. With a special permit from our collection, you can publish it, and we will send a much better quality TIFF file. But for browsing, you can use this link on the slide. Some examples. The contents of these photos are really diverse, and quite a lot of them are connected to the present territory of Pakistan. So maybe you will find some interesting ones. A lot of them are published, but a lot of them are still unpublished in normal, good quality form. Also connected to archaeological excavations, there are some, and at last time I wanted to show that even about the Museum of Peshawar are included in this photo collection. So thank you very much for your attention, and sorry for the technical problems.
So thank you, everyone. On behalf of Peshawar Museum and on behalf of Directorate General of Archaeology and Museum and organizing committee, I extend my deepest gratitude to all the distinguished speakers, guests, and participants who made this symposium a success. Today's exchange of knowledge has not only enriched our understanding of heritage and archaeology, but also reaffirmed the value of dialogues across culture. We are especially thanks to the Embassy of Hungary for their valuable collaboration and support. This partnership symbolizes our shared commitment to preserving cultural heritage, fostering academic and cultural ties between Pakistan and Hungary. We look forward to continue this meaningful collaboration in future initiatives. Thank you all again. Sorry. Yeah, indeed. I want to invite my dearest respected sir, Director, International Relations, Peshawar University, to share his valuable thoughts.
Thank you so much for inviting me for a moment of sharing. Thanks, Dora. This is something really amazing that you have come all the way along from Islamabad and have given us this opportunity to attend this symposium / seminar / webinar, because the two gentle fellows, the things that they have really digged out is amazing and is really worthwhile and has really made us ponder upon, especially Luca's presentation as well as the other gentle fellows' presentations were really something that have invited us to have further research on these respective subjects. So I believe that this kind of activity used to take place, such activities a lot once upon a time. And Peshawar was the center of all these academic and research activities. But because of, and this is, Dora, for yourself, the moment this, since 1979 with the Afghan revolution, well, we say it is revolution, but this revolution caused us a lot, really, especially the people of Peshawar. Since then, things went so bad, rather from bad to worse, I should say. And therefore, these activities were then started, they started shrinking. And then over and above, rather, we had taken a sigh of relief, and the war on terror started, and then further things were really quite strangulated. However, it's really interesting that now this Victoria Hall is once again abode by all of us. Certain activities are taking place, and people like yourself are coming over all the way along for hosting such webinars in this historic hall. So for that matter, really, our heartfelt thanks that I say from the point of view of all entire audience. Thank you so much, really. And once again, you are most welcome. Come again anytime you feel like for such kind of academic and research activities. With this, I sign out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Now it's time to have some tea. So the participants, you have your tea on your right side. We have some cookies. So please, the forum is closed and take your time, enjoy your tea. Thank you so much.
Can I say something just before concluding? Since we were not in position to take our tea, can you hear us or not? Before concluding, since you are enjoying a tea, and unfortunately me and my esteemed colleague from Budapest, we are unfortunately not in position to enjoy, can I say one final word, and also to thank the organizers and the Peshawar Museum. Okay, number one, I have shared this photograph before concluding, which is a photograph I took some years ago in Kabul. That is the grave of Aurel Stein in the British cemetery. I don't know if you ever been there, but that is something which I think in future the Hungarian embassy from Islamabad, or maybe in future from Kabul, should take care of, because it's really an important testimony of that, of the entire life. I mean, the way the life of Aurel Stein ended in Kabul is extremely representative of the geniality of an entire life, because it ended in a so strangely epic and heroic way that it's like the death of one of these epic heroes of the past that he was studying throughout his own life. Just if you consider the second last event, which is linking Stein to Swat, in winter 1941, he was a 70-year-old. He dared to cross the Kandia Pass. In winter time, and that was the thing through which he concluded, I mean, up to a certain extent, his entire career of explorer. That was a hugely and a very important achievement. 79-year-old, he crossed the 4,000, if not more, snowed height of the Kandia Pass, reaching from Swat the Indus Valley. And then the following year, finally, he managed to reach Kabul, where after a few weeks or few days, he passed away. Thank you very much for the organization of this great conference. I hope that in 2026, there will be something much bigger than this.
Hello, Dr. Luca, can I take your moment, please?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to invite Dr. Dora Gunsberger for a special thanks to the participants and to the presenters as well.
Thank you very much for all of you who joined us today, and special thanks to Professor Luca Maria Olivieri and Mr. Mate Rotter for joining us this time online, and hopefully next year we'll be able to welcome you in person in Peshawar. I really, really hope to see you all again. We hope to continue this collaboration from our side as well. Let's join here again in 2026. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time, and see you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Luca.
Thank you. All the best to everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.